So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of not having a self. It's often interpreted from Buddhism as being no self. I think probably a better translation is non-self. I say that not as a person who knows how to translate the language, but as a just from personal experience. uh, it's a pretty scary idea. It feels nihilistic when you hear it from Buddhism. So it's important to it's good ideas should confront you, but then you need to explore what's confronting about it and what might be beneficial about it. The confronting might be the beneficial thing. And in this case, the whole idea behind no self is to help you let go of an illusion that causes suffering. But if you just hear it first, in fact, most people wouldn't teach mindfulness by saying, hey, you got no self. Or maybe they do, but for a lot of people, that would be not a reason to meditate. You're like, I came here to meditate because I want to make myself happier, not because I want you to annihilate me. That sounds awful. So you have to keep in mind the idea behind this no self is that all your problems are created by the idea of self. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that no self is designed to allow you to see through an illusion. So it's not actually going to change anything in reality, right? No one's disappearing. Nothing is going to disappear that wasn't, you know, that wasn't already disappearing. I guess we could put it that way. So Joseph Goldstein likes to use the example of like constellations in the sky, or the Big Dipper, I think he uses, to explain the emptiness of no self. So we all know the Big Dipper, right? It's a constellation of 5 stars or so up in the sky, and we all know where it is and can see it, and we know what it's shaped like. And is the Big Dipper real? We all talk about it. We all know what it is, but is it a real thing? Is there, for instance, one way to put it, is there a Big Dipper, a dipper like a serving spoon in the sky? There's not a big serving spoon in the sky. Right? Let's put it another way. Is there any sense in which those stars are working together somehow to form an object? Well, they're not really doing anything other than they happen to appear in our awareness, and then we have given them a name, right? So when I tell you the Big Dipper is an illusion, nothing changes in reality. Nothing that was there disappears. And as a kid, maybe you're like, oh, there are gods in the sky and they're shaped like stars. But for most of us, we already know that. It's not a big loss when we go like, yeah, the Big Dipper is just a name we use to describe an arrangement of experience. It has no essence. I could have drawn different stars into that constellation. And different cultures do have different constellations. So the mind created the Big Dipper. It wasn't there in reality before the mind created it. A mind. And we all do that again and again. Think about another thing. How about a table? Let's imagine this actually. You're walking through the forest and amazingly, two trees got broken off in a storm and a stone fell down on those two stumps. And it looks just like a table with two legs. Maybe there's a third leg that's another stone, right? It's like a three-legged table. And you see it, it's like, that looks like a table. It's a flat stone. It's like I could put a placemat there and I could have dinner and scoot up a chair. It looks like a table. Is it a table? There's not actually a table there. If a table forms in the wood and there's no one there to have dinner on it, is it a table? Right? The mind just created the image of a table and said, hey, that looks like a table. Now, I could go use it as a table and then somehow it would sort of become a table, but it's not essentially a table, right? It's rocks and stumps. Nothing changes when I say there's no real table there, or when I say there is a table there. Nothing changes other than my mind's interpretation of what's real, of what's there. It's a way of seeing reality, right? And what if I told you, hey, actually, someone came along and they put those stumps there and they put that boulder there and they laid that rock over the top to make a table. And you're like, okay, that's a table, I guess. Just like when we look in our house and we see this piece of wood with four legs and another flat surface on top, we're like, that's a table. Someone made that to be a table. What makes it a table? What makes it a table is that somebody's mind decided to make it a table. And we're like, okay, that's what a table is. It's a thing humans make in this shape to use in a certain way. What created the table? An idea created the table. But as you see, there's no difference in the object in front of you. The object in the forest that happened accidentally and the object in the forest that happened because some human came along and put it that way, there's no physical difference in the object. So it's not like one becomes a table because of something that's actual in the world. It's only a story we tell. If you switch the story, the object changes. If I tell you it happened accidentally, it's no longer a table. If I tell you it's because a human made it that way, it's the table. You hear what I'm saying? The idea changes and the object changes. But nothing in reality changes. Let's do a little further. You find a boulder in the forest. You say, that's a boulder. You say, there's a rock. Now, rock is real, right? Okay, but what is the rock? Let's say, where are the boundaries of the rock? You know there's a rock. You're like, there's a rock. No one can deny there's a rock. I can hit my head on it. It's a rock. That's reality. But in your mind, you've carved that rock off from the rest of reality. You said that's the rock, and then everything else is not the rock. Not the famous actor. So let's explore that a little bit. How did that rock come to be there? Well, imagine a different rock, or imagine a bigger boulder, and it's starting, the water is seeped down through a crack, and it started to split it apart by freezing and heating. And it's like this big boulder is now split in two, almost. Are there two rocks? Is there one rock? The mind can decide. At a certain point, the mind's like, yeah, that's one rock. They split apart. That's two rocks. And then the other one rolls down the hill because it gets swept away in a flood. And now the one rock is just left there. Guess what? There's actually cracks in the rock that's left there too. Is it one rock? Or is it just an accident of history? Just like it's an accident of history that the Big Dipper, those stars are not close to each other in reality. They just happen to look that way from where we stand on our planet. Just an accident of history that they come together and look that way. It's an accident of our biology that we like edges, that our eyes can notice the edges of things with a clean break. I shouldn't say an accident, it was a useful thing. But those edges aren't reality, they're a way we're seeing reality. How can we tell this? Well, we can look really close at the edge of a boulder, and if you do, if you were with a microscope or something, maybe that we don't even have the tools of, you'd see molecules of the stone floating off the stone, right? And see that as they get washed away by water or your hand or whatever, molecules of stone fall away. What is the boundary of the stone? When did the stone begin? When did the stone end? These are not questions you can actually answer. And yet you say, there is a stone, as if it had a beginning and it had an end, and it has a boundary that's fixed. It's a useful thing, but it's not real. Yes, the solid thing there is real. The experience of a solid thing is real. But the idea that it's a separate stone, separate from everything else, that you could then say, that's my stone. You put your name on it. So a flood comes along and is rushing this boulder down the side of the mountain. And it's bouncing off things and it's slowly tumbling, and then it stops for a while, then it gets washed down further. And it gets to like a waterfall, but it's caught by a branch that's stuck across the waterfall. And it's kind of shaking every time the water comes along, and it's the branch is kind of bouncing. And you're watching this, you're like, oh, that stone's really trying to get down to the next level. Like, it's so close, it just needs to break through there or roll off that edge, just slip off, and it's going to get down to the bottom of the waterfall. And we know that rock is not trying to do anything. But there's a way of telling the story. Hey, that rock started up on the top of the mountain, and then it did this, and then it did that, and it came down here, and now it's just got to get a little bit further to get to the bottom of the waterfall. That's a way of telling that story. We anthropomorphize things. There's a waterfall of nervous system happenings, of neuronal happenings in your body. We could talk about it at the level of neurons, or we could talk about it at the level of desires. It's a waterfall. It's bouncing, the nervous system bounces along, and then it gets to a desire. And the mind interprets that sensation in the body. Like, I am trying to get off of this waterfall. Right? You find yourself stuck on the edge of a waterfall, and you're grabbing onto a branch, and you're like, I got to get to the bottom here, but my coat is stuck. And you're like, I need to get my coat unstuck so I can drop into the pool below. What is this I? What does this need to? There's a cascade of things that happen. You could say from your childhood on if you want, or before that, right? Before you were born. Or there's a cascade of things that happened in the last hour in your nervous system building up. You can tell the story all sorts of ways, right? Who is trying to get to the bottom of the waterfall? Who is trying to do that? Is the 3-year-old you trying to do that? The 3-year-old you who just wants to be safe? Yeah, that's a fine way to tell the story. It can be useful, right? The 3-year-old you who was not comforted by his mother when he needed to be. It's like, I just got to get this coat off the thing and then I'll be all right. Yeah, that's a fine way of telling the story. Or who is doing that? Who is it? The adult you who's trying to get to the bottom of the waterfall, who needs to get back to his or her kids and take care of them? Or is it some like teenage you who just wants to have an adventure? It's like, I want to dive to the bottom of this thing. And like, or is it a materialistic you who's like, my coat is, I really care about this. I don't want to rip it. Those are all stories. Or maybe it's your mother who's trying to get to the bottom of the pool, right? Who had a kid to pass on her genes and really needs those genes to survive. And so she implanted in you desires to protect yourself. And so those desires are coming into fruition right now as you find yourself stuck in this predicament. Or maybe it's the first mammal that walked on land that's trying to get to the bottom of the pool. Or literally a gene in your DNA. Or maybe it's the universe that seems designed to maximize entropy by increasing complexity. And it's like, this universe is generating these beings, these complex, beautiful beings that know how to survive so that they can generate more complexity. And the universe is saying, get to the bottom of this because you've got to get home and make more of you, or you've got to get home and make a symphony or whatever it is. Who is trying to get to the bottom of the pool? Well, or is it just like the boulder? It's a story we tell. Desires are happening. Genetics is happening. Neurons are happening. Beliefs are happening. Water is happening. The tree is happening. The earth is revolving around the sun as night starts to fall is happening. Memories are happening. Mental talk is happening. Parts of you go away forever as you're doing this. Skin cells disappear. Brain cells die. Thoughts are thought that will never be thought again. New thoughts arise. To say there's no one there is not to change a single molecule of the situation. It's just to say the idea that someone's here is a story we tell about this situation and that we believe in. And there's really no problem with that other than it creates problems. That is, there's no problem with it other than it causes suffering. So nothing about the no self idea. Let me hammer this home to make sure. I'm sure we all understand this, but the self is like a table. The self is like a constellation. The self is a thing. We take a bunch of things that happen to arise together, feelings and pictures and talk and sensations in the body, and we label those things a self, just like we label the Big Dipper a Big Dipper. But the boundaries are a little bit arbitrary, and you don't need that self to understand anything. You don't need the Big Dipper. There's nothing about, if you never knew the idea of the Big Dipper, it would not in any way hinder your understanding of stars. You don't need a self to understand what's happening inside your experience. You don't need a self to be fully present with what's happening. You don't need a self to get to the bottom of the waterfall. That will happen, whether you create a self in your mind or not. This doesn't mean anything disappears. The desires might be there. The beliefs might be there. The memories will be there. The body will be there. Those are all also things that aren't real. They're all empty, right? But they're all going to be there in exactly the same way they were before. So when we start to experience the world through the idea of no self, what changes? Well, there's one thing that changes. A belief disappears. A belief disappears that has a whole bunch of consequences for how we experience our life. The belief is, I am this feeling or this thought. And now, because I'm biological, I also think I have to protect this I. So whatever I say I am, I have to protect. And so I have to separate it from the rest of reality and protect it from reality and fight off reality and get reality to do what that part of that thing wants. If I don't do that, I don't have to do any of those things. There's no problem here anymore. Once I adopt the idea, the I belief, I adopt all the stories associated with it, all the desires, all the struggles, all the problems. Now, I'm going to stop because I'm going a little long, but that's sort of the Buddhist version of it, right? You're going to see the emptiness of self, but it's important to notice that there's also, this is why I would translate it as non-self. There is something that doesn't seem to change, that does seem essentially what it is, that's here. And maybe that's the real I. And in fact, that's what I would say. I'd say there is a sense of self with a capital S that our mind adopts and attaches to things. There's this idea, there's awareness here. Awareness is real. That cannot be doubted. Awareness is real. And is what you really are. The I thought goes, who's aware? Oh, Matt is aware. The guy with these memories and these feelings. And that's not really true. Awareness is aware of these thoughts and feelings. That's true. But these thoughts and feelings are not aware. They're just sensations. And so this idea that we are something and someone, yes, there's this reality here that cannot be denied. And when we stop struggling against reality, our suffering, sometimes it just vanishes. What is reality? Reality is there's not a self here in our normal sense of the word. There is awareness here. There is a being here. There is a beingness here. There is a presence here. It cannot be denied. It is fundamental. It never ends. It never began. It's always been. It loves in the sense of it's perfectly accepting. It creates in the sense of that it allows anything and everything to happen. And it never wavers. This is why the truth is really a truth of non-self. We aren't we aren't constellations. Or the constellations aren't real, right? Those are just ideas. We are something more. We are the space it all happens in.